who else can you bring along to launch such an event than Roger Protz? Now, I guess many of you will know Roger and Roger's background, but for those that don't, Roger is a very well respected beer writer. He's a journalist by trade. He has written over about 30 books on different beers. He's lectured around the world in Australia, all over the UK, Canada, America particularly, and now Aylesbury.
Made it.
So,
we Peckham next week, on top of the world.
So really, that's all I'm going to say in terms of introduction. Roger will give you a little rundown on what we're doing here and why we're doing it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. Aylesbury is a place that I've driven through many times. Haven't stopped very often. Some years ago, when I edited CAMRA's newspaper What's Brewing, I would drive through Aylesbury on my way to Bicester, where the printers were, but didn't stop here very much. I used to stop halfway between Bicester and Aylesbury at a pub, which I'm told is now closed. I have that effect on pubs, I have to warn you, but, which sold something called ABC Bitter. I apologise for resurrecting the name. It is absolutely marvellous to be here this evening. It's great to see such a good crowd. I'm enjoying some fantastic beers. I'm really impressed by the pub, which is very large and very comfortable. Tremendous range of beers. I'm told they do 500 guest beers a year, which is absolutely phenomenal. And of course now brewing wonderful beers, interesting beers, and I'm told the brewers plan to do a lot of very innovative beers, some old porters and stouts from 18th century and 19th century recipes. They've invited me to recommend a beer that I would like them to do for me, which is an interesting challenge. I'm good at closing pubs and breweries, I think, so they've got to be very careful. It's great to have the first brewery in Aylesbury for 75 years. Isn't that a remarkable achievement? Isn't it astonishing that a town of this size has not had a brewery for 75 years? And it's also sad what happened to the Aylesbury Brewery Company, because I mentioned ABC Bitter, and it just shows you the way in which big brewers operate. Back in the early days of CAMRA, Allied breweries produced beers called ABC Benskins, Friary Mukes, better known as Friary Pukes, I seem to remember, and something called Taylor Walker, which used to be a brewery in London. Now, I went to their brewery in Burton-on-Trent some years ago, and they admitted to me that all those beers were actually one beer. They were all 3.7% alcohol, and all they did was to change the hops or the hop pellets slightly from one beer to another to give each beer a slightly different character. Now that is a rubbish way of making beers. Not only a rubbish way of making beers, it's a terrible insult to people like your good selves from Aylesbury, because you're being sold a beer brewed in Burton-on-Trent, which, as far as I know, is not in Buckinghamshire, which is masquerading as a genuine beer for the locality. I live in St Albans, so Benskins was not far from me, a famous beer from Watford, and of course they were just producing this total emasculation of what Benskins Bitter used to be like. And it is what fascinates me. I mean, Ian mentioned my travels around the world. What fascinates me is the mindset of giant global brewers. Some years ago I was in Stockholm in Sweden, and I was speaking to the people who ran Pripps Brewery. Pripps is the biggest brewery in Sweden.
Oh, yes.
And they told me that some years ago Anheuser-Busch, the world's biggest brewer, manufacturers of the well-known rice beer Budweiser, they flew in to Stockholm. They took over the top suite of the biggest hotel in Stockholm. They set up giant computers and they crunched in every single piece of information they could get about Pripps. Now, Pripps had been a state-owned brewery, a government-owned brewery. When it was privatised, the government were looking for a new company to own and run Pripps, so they thought Anheuser-Busch would be just the company to own them. At the end of the week, Anheuser-Busch, they put all the computers back into boxes, they got in their stretch limos and they drove back to the airport. And somebody from Pripps said, "Hey, don't you want to buy us?" And Anheuser-Busch said, no, we spill more beer than you make. And I've heard that expression so often from big brewers, including in this country. They look at regional brewers, they look at microbrewers, and they say, we spill more beer than you make. What they're missing is that in this day and age, people don't want to drink the beer they spill. They don't even want to drink the beer they actually make and don't spill. What people want to drink are beers with aroma and flavour and character. And I find going around the country that there are so many dedicated people now, so passionate about beer, and they realise, and the media in this country don't report it, all they talk about are binge drinking and problems about alcohol. What they don't say is that most people drink beer sensibly and moderately, and what they're looking for are beers with character, aroma and flavour. I was doing beer talks at the BBC Food Show in Birmingham last week, and a woman, a very respectable, even posh woman from Leicester, told me that she drives around the country in a camper van, going to pub after pub after pub in the Good Beer Guide to try all the different beers there are now available. Now that shows a remarkable degree of dedication. And I hope that liver lasts for a little bit longer. But that is not untypical of the tremendous interest there is in good beer in this country again. When the Good Beer Guide came out in September, we said there are 840 breweries in Britain. It's gone up a bit since then. It's probably 850 or 860 now. And we now have in this country the biggest number of breweries since the 1940s. Even I don't remember them, but what I do know is that, of course, in the 60s and 70s, many of those breweries were wiped out by mergers and takeovers and closures, the creation of what CAMRA called the Big Six, Bass and Allsops and so on, Ally Breweries and Whitbread and so on, who emasculated choice by introducing these awful keg beers. Some of you of my age will remember What Is Red. I can see you turning pale at the thought. And CAMRA was created to fight back against that threat to only produce mass-produced beers, national beers, and to get rid of small local breweries and small local beers for local people. Now, the worm has turned in a very, very big way. Even the big boys are now beginning to realise they've got to go back and start producing beers that people actually want to drink. I found, you mentioned Australia, Ian. I've been to Australia twice in recent years. Do you know, I have to warn you, if you go to Australia, you can't get Foster's anymore. I'm very sorry to tell you that. But, Foster's is now an export brand only. Even Australia now has a tremendous number of really good small craft breweries producing tremendous beers. It's happening all over the world. In October, I was giving talks on India Pale Ale at a beer festival in North Carolina, because the Americans are fascinated with the beer style that originated in this country, India Pale Ale. So all around the world there is tremendous revival of beers with character, and that is what people want to drink. So I'm so delighted to see not only all of you here this evening, but to see this wonderful pub, tremendous range of beers, a dedicated little brewery at the back. And I've tried some of the beers. I may not have the chili beer again, but some of them are extremely good. And I look forward to the challenge of creating a beer with them. And I think you're going to have great fun over the coming months and years to see all the tremendous variety of beers that they're going to produce. And that to me is the really exciting thing going on in this country. Not only are there lots and lots of breweries now who are bucking the trend. We're in a recession, pubs are closing, but now, Castmark, who look after the quality of beer in pubs, they say all the information is that pubs that have a good range of cask beers are the pubs that will survive and the pubs that will thrive. And that is the case clearly here. And I think the really exciting thing is the restoration of old and new beer styles, because when CAMRA started, if you look through early Good Beer Guides, most brewers were producing mild and bitter and nothing else. Just look at the choice now. India Pale Ales, Pale Ales, proper porters and stouts, old ales, barley wines, but also innovative brews like golden ales, which are now so popular. Beers made with fruit, beers made with herbs and spices, and to me one of the most fascinating new things is beers which are aged in whiskey casks, which are bringing a whole new aroma, character and flavour to beer. Absolutely fascinating. When I was in the States a couple of months ago, I tasted 27 beers aged in whiskey barrels. Not all at once, I hasten to add. I was allowed back on the plane afterwards, but this is just indicative of all the fascinating, wonderful things going on both in this country and other countries, the great beer revolution. And we are part, a little tiny bit of the beer revolution going on here. So I wish them all the very best for the future, and it's my very great pleasure to pronounce the new brewery open.
Thank you very much. No more needs to be said.